Hi, I'm Kristen TenDyke, and today I'm going to show you how to work on double-pointed needles in the round for knitting things with a small circumference, such as sleeves or socks or fingerless mitts, mittens, anything with a smaller circumference than a circular needle holds comfortably. So what you'll need for today is a set of 4 or 5 double-pointed needles, and whether or not you use the set of 4 or a set of 5 depends on how many stitches are going to be on each needle and how comfortably they fit. If there are a lot of stitches on the needles and the stitches keep falling off the ends, then you may want to increase from 4 needles to 5 needles so that there's fewer stitches on each needle. So because I've cast on only 30 stitches, we're going to use 4 needles for today. And what that means is that we will use 3 needles to divide the stitches, and the 4th needle will be used to knit the stitches. If there were more stitches and we needed to put them onto 4 needles, then they would be arranged something like this, and the 5th needle would be used to knit the stitches. So when beginning to learn this technique, it's recommended to cast on your stitches onto 1 needle to begin with. And then we will slip the stitches onto the other 2 needles to divide them evenly over 3 needles. It's recommended to do it this way to prevent the stitches from getting twisted. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So you can start from either end. However, I like to start from the end that has the yarn on it. When I begin knitting, I'm going to want the yarn on my right needle. So I'm going to start slipping the stitches with my yarn on the right needle because I don't want to have to fiddle with the needles too much after they're slipped, but before I start knitting. To begin slipping the stitches, slide them down towards the tip of the needles, and with your empty needle, you're going to insert the empty needle into the first stitch as if you're going to purl, but instead we're just going to slip it off. And be careful to make sure it stays on 1 needle and doesn't just slide off completely. And because I've cast on 30 stitches and we're dividing over 3 needles, there's going to be 10 stitches for each needle. So I'm going to slip 10 stitches, just one at a time, and you can go as slow as you need to in order to make sure those stitches are where you want them to be. Okay, so there's 10 for the first needle, and once those 10 are on there, I'll slide them down toward the middle of the needle so they don't slide off the tip. And then I'll grab the second needle and we'll slip another 10 stitches onto this next needle. And then I'm going to slide to the middle for that needle and also for this one, so that all 3 needles have the stitches kind of toward the middle and not near the tips. And our next step is to join these stitches here. And to do that, we'll need to flip these over in order to start working with these 2 needles as our left and our right needle, with the yarn attached to the right needle. So now it's helpful if we're not too fiddly with the way the needles are positioned right now, because ideally we want this cast on to flow evenly all the way around the corners. It's possible if we maneuver these needles around too much that these will get twisted or somehow rearranged, and this is the way we want them to look right now, where it just kind of flows evenly around all the corners and it stays all on the inside. And then determine which of these tails here is the one that's attached to the ball of the yarn, and then slide the other one out of the way, because we'll work with the yarn tail that is attached to the ball of the yarn. When you're ready to start knitting, you slide these needles again back so the stitches are close to the tips, and it's possible to just begin knitting with your first with the first stitch and going across. However, there's this little tip that I like to do sometimes of we're going to swap these stitches to help secure that join. And this is optional. You don't have to do it. I just find that it helps to secure it a little bit more. So this step would be to slip this first stitch onto the right needle, and then to take the left needle and go into this stitch. It's currently the second stitch on the needle, but it's the first one that was there. And we're going to put it on that needle by pulling it over that other one. And leave them both on the needles. So it secures it and kind of locks them into that triangle shape. Now this needle on the right, I'm not going to be using that one for the knitting. So I'm going to slide those stitches up toward the middle. And I'm going to put it underneath the left needle, because the first thing I'm going to do is work across these stitches on the left needle using the empty needle. And just work whatever stitches it tells you to do in the pattern. For this example, I'm just going to knit all the way across. And this needle down here on the bottom, depending on how you knit, you may like to have it on top of your left needle, or you may like to have it on the bottom, or you may find that sometimes you like it on the top and sometimes you like it on the bottom. Just play with it and see what works best for you. And you can slide it under if it's in the way on top, or vice versa. And sometimes it's helpful to make it shorter just to get it out of the way, because it can become cumbersome if it's annoying. So just be mindful of what it's doing and get it out of your way if it's problematic. Okay, so we've arrived at the end of the first leg of these stitches on this round. So what we do here is we're going to rotate, and now this needle, we're done with it, so we're going to make sure it stays underneath the new left needle that we're going to work across. And when switching needles, you want to give the yarn a little extra tug, because it's possible for that yarn to get loose there, and it can become visible if it happens consistently that it's loose all the way up. So if you give it that extra tug, it prevents it from having that loose, what's called a ladder, appear on your work. And then, so with that little extra tug, you knit the first stitch and continue along all the way to the end again. Yeah, see, trying to not let that needle annoy me, but it's there. This one. Okay, and then when we're at the end, we'll just rotate again. And we can see that our beginning of the round is down here, where the tail is. And for the first few rounds, it's possible to really find the beginning of the round because of that tail. But as your project grows, you may like to put a stitch marker into the fabric at that location, just to make sure that you can identify which corner is the beginning of the round. And it's basically the same thing, just working on one needle at a time and then rotating, remembering to give a little tug in between each needle shift, and keeping the needles out of your way so that you're able to wrap the yarn and see the stitches. And remember to go slow as you're learning new things. Be patient with yourself. So that's how you work in the round on double pointed needles. And if you've enjoyed this video, I encourage you to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next tutorial.